Hi, everyone. So, thank you all for joining us in that fantastic conversation that we had in our smaller breakout group. And it was a really productive conversation where we got to get to know one another as well as begin to identify some of the barriers to entering and remaining in the market as Black tech entrepreneurs. So, a lot of what we heard was making sure that Black folks have the resources they need at scale to be successful and to also have brand recognition and to elevate that brand recognition as well as finding a way to make sure that Black tech entrepreneurs also have access to capital at scale because the fact that these disparities exist, right? It's something very outrageous, but it's something that we can do something about, right? If solutions do exist. And so, as we begin this conversation about solutions that do exist, we want to begin to think about what like different levers and tools are at our disposal. And so, one of the tools that we can use to help eliminate these disparities are using government and holding them accountable to responding to our needs as Black tech entrepreneurs. And so today we're really fortunate to have Representative Darshan Kendrick from Georgia answer a few questions and give some of her insight about how to tackle these thorny issues. And so we're going to go ahead and play that video for you all now.
I am Faith Campbell, consultant with Color of Change, and we are here with the Building Black Together conference. I'm so pleased to have Representative Darshan Kendrick here with us. Darshan, please introduce yourself and tell us how you have been supporting our communities nationwide in terms of building Black economic empowerment.
Well, I thank you so much for having me, first of all, and I hope everyone is doing well during this crazy 2020. But that being said, so I've been elected to the legislature for a decade now, and I've really got an opportunity to learn more about how policy affects how capital is distributed, how capital flows, who gets it, and really, when we talk about Black wealth, it really centers on what opportunities are out there to get access to capital and what that means in the technology space, particularly because tech companies obviously need funding, sometimes a lot of it. And then also in my day job as a corporate securities attorney and an investment advisor, I have a professional background in capital markets. And so putting those two things together, I've been able to do a number of things. I have hosted a Blacks in Tech policy conference for the last 3 years. Obviously, we didn't have it this year because of COVID, but it was an opportunity to bring Black technologists, founders, supporters together with corporate entities, coupled with policymakers. And so we've had it at City Hall for the last 3 years. We were able to get some legislation out of those conferences and propose them and progress them, and actually got one passed our first year. And so we're steadily working, every chance that we can get to really incorporate the thriving Black tech ecosystem into the policymaking process.
And so on a policy level, how do we create more access to capital for our communities?
Well, there's a few ways. How long do we have? I particularly think one of the best ways from a policy standpoint to get access to capital, really dive into our tax code, because if you take a look at the US tax code and the Georgia tax code, it is one of the most, it causes the most disparity between the wealth gap. Who gets tax refunds and credits? It looks very different than who I think should get them, right? So when you're talking about Black technology companies, they are not as inclusive into the people that are getting all the tax credits, at least on the state of Georgia, as they could be. So I think one of the things we have to do is really take a look at our tax structure and who is getting the tax credits, and placing, some parameters around who gets those tax credits.
What is your definition of true Black economic empowerment? What does that look like for you?
I think it is something that first we as Black people have to think about it for ourselves, because trying to get it from the rest of the world is a longer term sort of mission. But Black empowerment to me really means supporting with encouraging words and with your dollars. Black empowerment also means having the resources that you need in order to not only help yourself, but to help someone else. So whether that be, monetary resources, whether that be mentorship, whether that be, an informal group of people that you can just bounce out ideas off of,
Right.
whatever that thing is that allows you to wake up every day and feel like you can take on the world. To me, that is, essentially Black empowerment. And then you pass it on, to somebody else, because it's not just for us.
So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we hope to talk to you soon.
Hello, I'm Darshan Kendrick, State Representative for the Great 93rd House District here in the state of Georgia. And welcome to Building Black Together Conference, powered by Color of Change.
I am Faith Campbell, consultant with Color of
Hi,
Change.
everyone. We're super excited to present this all-star panel to you all. Today, we'll have Jade Magnus Ogunnaike, our Senior Director of Campaigns, moderating our panel. And our panelists include Kathryn Finney, who is who's a tech entrepreneur, a futurist, and the founder of Digital Undivided. We have Dell Gines, the Senior Community Development Advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, and Lazandra Dial, the Executive Director of the City of Oakland's Workforce Development Board. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jade, who is going to kick off our wonderful panel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Color of Change's Building Black Together event. This is an event for Black tech entrepreneurs to come together and discuss some of the successes and challenges of being Black entrepreneurs in the tech space. As Marie shared, my name is Jade Magnus Ogunnaike. I am the Senior Director of the Media, Culture, and Economic Justice team at Color of Change, and I'm so excited to be on such an illustrious panel with such wonderful guests. So let's go ahead and get started. My first question is for Kathryn. Kathryn, we know that you are a groundbreaking entrepreneurial futurist. You have built Digital Undivided from the ground up, all from a simple idea, and you've navigated the entire startup process. At Color of Change, we really want to end practices that hold Black people back. And we know some of those practices exist in the business world too. What are some of the major structural impediments to Black tech entrepreneurship that you personally have seen?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jade, and the entire Color of Change family. It's great to be on the panel with friends like Dell and Darshan and new friends as well. Digital Undivided was actually the second company I built. The first company I built was a blog way back in the day, starting in 2002. I built this blog that became a social media company, and then I sold it. And so saw firsthand some of the structural changes really twice. And the challenges are really varied. One is access to capital. It's very difficult to raise capital as a person of color, especially a woman of color. That was one major structural barrier. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Another structural barrier was really access to talent. When you're building a tech company, you do have to know tech. You need to know how to code, you need to know infrastructure. Granted, that has changed recently, with more of what you see is what you get coding and things like that. So it's not as much of a barrier as it once was. But in the beginning, it was a real barrier. Now, for me, I was lucky because I married my tech talent. So I had in-house tech support, but I still had to learn how to code. I had to learn how to build SQL databases. I had to do all of these sort of things that were really barriers. Another barrier at that time, and this again has changed, was access to even the internet itself, like the basic infrastructure that you need to build the tech company. So before you could even code, you have to have access to the web. And that was really, really difficult. When I first started, I used to sneak into my husband's office and use their web lines because we didn't have great internet access. And again, that's changed, but still, as people of color, particularly as Black people, we don't have as the same sort of infrastructure access as others do. And that can be a barrier to our ability to build. So those are the three sort of main challenges I faced. It was really kind of access to capital, the infrastructure, and access to the help and support I needed to get started.
Thank you so much for that, Kathryn. Access to capital and, even having access to the internet, I think is something that people, don't necessarily know disproportionately impacts Black communities. I think back in March or April, our members at Color of Change won a campaign because, sorry, y'all will hear my daughter getting ready for bed. Apologies.
Totally get it.
Broadband, so many Black students did not have access to broadband internet during the coronavirus pandemic. They need to get their schoolwork done. And I think those problems are so additionally compounded also for Black tech entrepreneurs who, Black people do not have access to the same level of wealth or even a safety net that people of other cultures and ethnicities do. Kathryn, you at COC, we're really interested in also in the role that government plays in creating and or maintaining these barriers. With your experiences as an entrepreneur, do you think that government played a role in creating any of these barriers? If so, and how? If so, how?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer, sure. I think one of the things, and I recently did a talk with one of the FCC commissioners, and I asked them, do you think the internet should be a utility, right? Like our telephone, regulated, the price is regulated, everything like that. And we had a really interesting discussion about that, because if the internet was a utility and there's certain rules that utilities have to reach all areas, right, of our country, then that would probably foster more people having access, particularly more people in urban communities having reliable access to the internet. And so, sure, government has created some, but government can also help solve some of those issues as well. I think in terms of the access to capital, government can be helpful in terms of sort of creating incentives for people to invest. We can have a discussion about whether or not those incentives have actually worked. I know some of the empowerment zone incentives and things like that have had varying degrees of success, but those are examples of things that the government can do. During the Obama administration, I served in a number of different national initiatives, national committees. I always joke, as soon as November 9, 2016 happened, my time on those committees ended. But during that time period, the Obama administration really used sort of this pulpit of the White House to bring people together. So while they couldn't necessarily write the checks, they could get people in the room that did write the checks. And those people wanted to have a relationship with the White House. They wanted to be in good favor with the president. So if the president was saying funding Black companies, increasing access to funding and support for Black entrepreneurs was a priority for him, then it became a priority for those people as well, because they wanted to be in good graces with the government. So there's many things that government can do. There's many things that have been done to create barriers, but again, there's a lot of solutions that they can also have as well.
Thank you so much for that, Kathryn. Internet as utility, I think, is a brilliant frame. And no matter whether your business is selling ice cream or, coding for different companies, you're going to need access to internet for a number of things. Thank you so much for that. I want to talk to Dell next. Dell, we know that you are committed to helping to empower economically distressed communities through super innovative economic strategies. How do you see the work of Black small businesses owners advocating for themselves as being valuable? And what have you found is most effective for Black small business owners advocating for themselves?
Well, first of all, it's great to hang out with Kathryn. It's been a while since I saw her, especially in person. So I'm excited about that. And just from a meta level, I really appreciate your organization framing everything from the lens of power. because I think that's been neutered out of the language, and so, but it's the most pressing thing that we need to put back into the forefront, because everything we're talking about is about power or powerlessness or the interactions of the power as we try to grapple and get power. And so you're one of the few groups that I've heard that have made that explicit. Like, we use code words, like even empowerment is a code word, and oh, by the way, the views in this presentation are my own, not necessarily the Federal Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve System. So my, objective is to bring the concept of power, Black power, back into the regular everyday lexicon, and us to stop skirting around that issue by using diversity and equity and all these other things, which are cool to use within their particular frameworks. But for us, as we look at our world, we need to conceptualize it as a power-based relationship. And how do we acquire it? How do we utilize it? How do we negotiate it? So when it comes to entrepreneurship and Black business, that's the fundamental element. So, like, one of the times because I'm a big believer in, you need to be able to measure what you want to achieve. And so I created two ratios. One is the job production ratio. The other is and I haven't figured out the other one, but let's just call it the leakage ratio. But the job production ratio kind of showed that for every 9 jobs that we need as Black people, we produce 1 through our businesses, compared to like 1.25 to 1 for whites and Asians. Then when you go to the leakage ratio, white businesses generate $2 of revenue for every $1 of purchasing power their population has. For every $1 purchasing power our population has, our businesses generate 20 cents on the dollar. So you see this 80-cent leakage that's going somewhere that's not in our communities, which is why I'm a bigger advocate of building Black versus buying Black campaigns. Because the logic is, if you build Black and you build effective Black businesses, then they're adequately able to understand how to negotiate and navigate and capture market share, which then in turn brings the dollars back to our community and increases the wealth rate. And we know that wealth is power in a democratic capitalist society. So this is where we're at. And part of the biggest challenge, and even going back to the question you asked, Kathryn, for me, continuing to go upstream, is it's a cultural issue for us. Like, the impediments that have been placed, in front of us have been systematic. It's been historically systematic and progressive over time. And as a result, we don't even know how to see ourselves. We can't even conceive of ourselves as independently powerful individuals and as a collective anymore. That's why we hook ourselves up to so much of this progressive narrative and all of these other narratives, that we're really riding on other people's trains, because we've almost lost our identity as who we are as a people. Like, we'll point back to like Black Wall Street, right? And you will use that as a symbolic, success for African Americans in America. And then we'll pull it forward, and we won't even look at how we constructed that and how we need to reconstruct it in a postmodern globalist networked environment, right? So it's like there's this disconnect where we look at the symbols of the past, but then we try to affix ourselves to other people's kind of narratives, ideologies, and philosophies versus creating our own, which to me should be embedded in Black economic empowerment. Because how else are you going to negotiate in this environment if you can't even afford to pay the legal bills when you get locked up? If you can't fund your own philanthropic organizations, your nonprofits, so you have to go to other people to get the funding, and then they do mission creep. Or if you can't negotiate with your political structures because you have no money to put into their PAC, right? All of these things come back into this thing that we call economics, and economics is rooted in entrepreneurship. And my final note before I turn it back over to you is, this is the importance of tech entrepreneurship. Because when you think of the concept of innovation, it's the creation of new market value, it's the creation of new market opportunities, it's the exploitation of what we see in the massive level of problem solvings that we're seeing, as rooted in that classic definition of entrepreneurship as disruptive. And that's where you see the most value come in. So our president, Esther George, said economies grow in 2 ways. 1 is through population growth, and 2 is through innovation. And innovation can occur outside of our traditional tech space, but by and large right now, the greatest opportunity for Black people in America is in the tech space, because it has certain low barriers to entry and high value in terms of output. So that's kind of where I'm coming at from this situation.
Thank you so so much for that. One of the things that you touched on that I found really powerful was the analysis of power in this entrepreneurship ecosystem, and it's not often talked about. Why should Black tech entrepreneurs prioritize pushing for power and structural change instead of sort of only focusing on their self improvement or their business?
Well, this is interesting because if we look at so Africans in America, the historical, the descendants of American enslaved Africans, right? Who most of us are, that are in this space today. When we look at kind of this concept of individualism. See, people get confused. Like we say America's individualistic and it's the Protestant work ethic and hyper individualism and pull yourself up over bootstraps. And it's majority a white narrative, right? But what's happened is they just have this meta, 30,000-foot group identity that then they feel comfortable because of privilege to express it as an individual. So it's individualism connect to hyper group collectivity that is expressed in marginalizing other people groups, right? And so when we try to adopt this concept of hyper individualism, what we don't recognize is we don't have the infrastructure for that in our communities. So when we go individual, we really are individual, like, right? We're disconnecting ourselves, we're rolling into that materialism. And so think of the concept of the way tech is structured now. I form a company, I get venture capital, I scale the company, and then I exit and accrue the wealth, right? So whoopee me. Okay, now you got rich, but what about everybody else? So we need to transform the mindset even of that particular structure that happens in tech to venture to exit and say, okay, like Malcolm said, you can't say that I'm progressing if my people are not progressing. And so what does it look like for us to even re-envision how we're capitalizing firms, we're doing these exits, the expectations of bringing that back into the community, into the culture. And that's what our ecosystem should be pushing for. It should be pushing for a collective group identity that has individualistic aspects, but doesn't have a lot of solo actors who are saying, as long as I get mine, I'm good. Everybody else can just do what they do.
And I also would say, I think that's a real privileged position. I'm a Black woman. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm a cousin. I'm a play cousin. I have all these identities. Everything I do is through the lens of everyone else. I do not have the privilege of saying that what's good for Kathryn is what I'm focused on. I think as a tech entrepreneur, one of the things that has been devalued in the space has been the currency that we have as Black people that is outside of traditional economic structure. So yes, our family may not be able to give us a $50,000 loan, $50,000 loan and not want it back, right? Everyone I know, if I get a $50,000 loan from them, they want it back. They want the exact date in which I'm going to give it back to them, if they can even give it to me, right? But there are other things that our families can and do for us, and our community can and do for us. So for example, when I first started Digital Undivided and I moved from New York to Atlanta, I was really struggling with childcare. And so I called my mom, as we often do, and kind of complained a bit, and she offered to come. And I thought she was coming for 2 weeks. She came and stayed for 4 years to help me with my son. Now, what was the value of that, the economic value of her coming and doing that? The peace of mind that I had that allowed me to focus on my business, the amount of money I saved, because if I was late or my husband was late, my mama wasn't going to throw my kid out, or wasn't going to get angry, wasn't going to charge us whatever money per minute that we were late. Like what economic value is that? And that's not captured in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, that sort of value, or the fact that you may go to a large church, right? And the fact that you could talk about the business that you're building in front of your church and possibly have 2,000 potential customers from this church, that's valuable, but that's not captured in the current ecosystem. That's often overlooked. And so I think we have a lot of resources in our community, but again, they're not valued in this traditional tech ecosystem.
Thank you so much for that, Kathryn and Dell. Both of y'all just dropped so many gems. I know that the Black entrepreneurs who are watching this, who are looking for inspiration from you all, got a lot from that. So often what's valued is what Jeff Bezos's $300,000 gift from his parents. That is what's looked at, as, basically you can't do anything unless you can get $300,000 from your parents to start an Amazon, right? That's sort of how things are looked at. Or you're an MIT or a Stanford dropout. Let's not even forget some of us like me who barely graduated from Howard University, okay? But we do have resources and we do have a wealth, and we see the way that our culture and our entrepreneurship and our ideas have totally shifted the tech ecosystem. I want to pivot to Lazandra. Lazandra, even though we're getting ready to go into this new administration, this Biden-Harris White House, Congress sort of still remains divided. And they remain divided. It can be a problem for us in many ways, especially when thinking about Black business and Black entrepreneurship and the very important and specific resources that our communities need to survive the coronavirus pandemic, and society at large. Given your, extensive experience working for the city of Oakland and Alameda County and state of California, what are some governmental actions that we can sort of hold government accountable to that might be outside of legislation? Where should we be looking for change from if we can't necessarily look to Congress?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. I am very honored to be on this panel. I am the new kid on the block. I felt a little left out, so I'm gonna have to follow up with some of y'all later so I can be in the club. So thank you for, again, for allowing me to be here. So I really, want to speak from my role in the city of Oakland. And, one of the things we can do and put in place without legislation is supplier diversity policies that require preference points to be given to minority owned, even though I hate using that word, but that's the word that's commonly used, women-based organizations. So we can build these things into our procurement process that allows for some recognition. But the other thing is, and I just really want to say before I get off of here, and want everyone to understand that policies are made at different levels of government. So everything is not legislatively mandated. So you can make inroads sometimes just by meeting with some of the department heads in that department that your tech company solves, whatever that is. And the staff, they're the ones who actually are making the recommendations. I didn't know if I was going to have a chance to say that. I say it all the time because I've came up in government and I had so much influence into decisions by being the program officer. And I could tell my boss, I met with this person, this is what they want. Let's make sure we build that into the procurement process. So I literally can build in the procurement process that the eligibility, they must be a Black tech business, or they must be in a certain district, or we've done some things around zip codes, like they have to come from the zip code. So those are some things that we can do. You don't have to always go all the way to city council. You can drop down inside of the organization and get some of your needs met. Now, all of them won't be met, but local government, is considered the people's portion of the government where you can see something more immediate. So yeah, that's what I would recommend right away. And and it's also not just city government, also county. So I've worked in county too. So city government, you have city council. In California, folks, I'm in California, so we have a board of supervisors in Alameda County. Those preference points are also there, but really in that procurement part is a real opportunity to really center and give preference points to organizations.
Thank you so much for that, Lazandra. As a follow-up to that, if I'm a Black tech entrepreneur, I'm building my business, how do I begin to build those relationships at the government level? What would you suggest for sort of getting to know people? Should we cold call? Should people cold email? How do people go about building those relationships with people in government who can really shift policies to make things better and improve, the success of Black entrepreneurs?
Yeah, my thing is, when we get off of this live stream today, go to the website, your city government and find out who are your elected officials. If you don't know, find out who they are. Find out who their staff is. Who is their chief of staff? Who is their chief of staff? Who is their they may have a community engagement liaison. They might have a governmental liaison. I can't stress enough the power that comes from not just talking to the city council member, but it's coming from their staff. Also, the department heads, I kind of alluded to that before. Go to the website, figure out what departments. It might be the information technology department. It could be planning and zoning. They could have a department of race and equity. You want to meet with those folks, but you also want to meet with their staff. Boards and commissions. All cities have boards and commissions. What are the boards and commissions in your city that align with what you're doing? And sometimes it may not even align. You may just need to just go to some of these meetings. Thank goodness, I guess, everything is virtual. At least it is for us in California. We're all locked up. That you can attend some of these meetings virtually and find out what is going on in on that board. Like my board is a workforce development board, and you can speak during public comment. Come to public comment. If you have a group of Black tech folks that you work with in your community, come as a collective, speak. We need to know, they need to know that you're here. You need to have your message. Now, given that you're not going to have that long to speak, they usually give you 2 or 3 minutes, but come with your message. Keep knocking on the door, have those meetings. You might even want to join your local chamber of commerce. If they don't have something specifically for you for Black tech, push it. Make sure they create that for you. Or you might want to join your Black Chamber of Commerce if you have one. But the folks are influential on these different boards. It's still who you know oftentimes. And they can, even though that's not a governmental entity, they do have some decision-making power, at least advisory. And for workforce boards, they actually have a seat, at least in California, they have a seat on the board. So there's ways that you can have these conversations, force the conversation, know what you want, know what their initiatives are and where you align, and also what policies they have. Push and demand and hold them accountable for what they're doing or what they're not doing. That needs to happen. And that doesn't happen enough. People don't show up at my meetings. And I always say, come talk. I'm the government person, so I can limit it and the push. But if you show up and you're pushing this, we will pay attention. The members will pay attention and they will push this and make sure it happens. So that's where I would say, go today, now, go find out who's on your local electeds, including your mayor, who's the staff, who's the department heads, what are the boards and commissions, and start, cold calling and having those conversations and just say, look, I have a concern. You need to talk to me and schedule those meetings.
Thank you so much for that, Lazandra. I think so often entrepreneurs or Black folks in tech my husband's a Black person in tech, don't necessarily think about how to interact with government that can, better diversify the people they have access to or the audiences they have access to. It is 6:56 where I am. I know that our time is getting ready to wrap up. Dell, Lazandra, and Kathryn, thank you all so much for sharing today. Would you all mind just sharing where folks can reach you after this or where folks can follow you after this? You all share such inspirational and, really common sense sort of advice today and guidance for our entrepreneurs. So I'll pass it to Lazandra first.
Thank you. So I can be found at the city of Oakland, Lazandra Dial. My email is ldial@oaklandca.gov. And if you really want to have a conversation about how do you engage, especially at the local level, how do you engage government to push policy, call me. I'm more than open to have that conversation to help you come up with a strategy to push the needle. We need you pushing the needle. There's not enough folks showing up at these city council meetings pushing. It's folks from out of our community who get their needs met because they show up. And we recognize sometimes it has to do with the timing of the meeting, but please feel free to reach out to me, Lazandra Dial, ldial@oaklandca.gov. And I look forward to chatting.
Kathryn, we'll pass it to you.
Yeah, you can reach me, Kathryn Finney, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, any of the social media channels. And definitely any advice on sort of how to get started, even how to think, what your first steps are in this process, because it can be sometimes unclear. Like, where do you begin when you're trying to build a tech company? Even what is a tech company and how is it different than a small business? Any of those things. I look forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you so much, and Dell.
Yeah, no, I just love being around talented Black people, Lazandra and Kathryn, and the whole crew that put this together. It's been great, Jade. You can find me at I am DellGines.com, or usually you just put in Dell Gines and it's going to pop up. Story behind I am Dell Gines. Somebody stole my domain name and started selling Korean popcorn or something on it. So therefore, I am Dell Gines, but just DELLGINES. And just disclaimer: if you go to some of my social media sites, you might see some baby animal pics or a lot of food and barbecue. So depending on where you land, you may get something totally different experience.
Right.
Well, thank you all so much. This panel was fantastic. I know I learned a lot and was left feeling inspired, like maybe I should start a business. Thank y'all so much. And I will pass it back to Marie.